It's that time of the week again. We are back with the Wild Ones podcast, the show where we chat about bike stuff. I'm Jimmy, and this week I am joined by producer Emily.
Hi.
And Nick, the bike mechanic.
Hello.
So basically, I've known you for something like 6 years now. You've taken more photos and video than anyone I've ever met in my entire life and literally posted none of it. I cannot imagine how many gigabytes of hard drives you've got with stored footage that will never, ever be seen by anyone ever again. However, you have finally hit a milestone and posted an actual YouTube video.
Yes, well, it's taken me 6 years to put all the footage together and edit it all. I just want to thank everybody that's watched it so far. But yeah, I just thought...
But what is it? What have you done? What have you done?
We've made a build video.
Who's we?
Well, me by myself, me and my tripod.
The royal we.
A lot of YouTube videos on how to edit, a lot of phone calls to you. I might do some how-tos, a bit more geeky mechanic stuff, not really entertainment, just stuff that I like. Bikes.
Not entertaining at all. There'll be no fun had at all.
So basically what's happened is I ripped off G. Milner, the YouTube build video guy, and did loads of bike build videos. I think me and Nick did something like 50 or 60 build videos where I shot them, put on my YouTube channel. And now Nick has now ripped me off and has decided he can replace me with a tripod and is just doing them himself. So if you are into super indulgent, slow build videos with nice audio and good visuals and outrageously good bikes, because Nick always builds good bikes, then get over to Nick's YouTube channel, which is Nick Vieri Bike Mechanic.
I finally appreciate you, because I always thought that like the 2-3 hours of filming was hard. I didn't realize that it's like 7 days of editing follows that and trying to... Yeah, it's also much easier with you moving the camera around instead of a tripod for every single shot.
Yeah, but I imagine you filming it on your own with a tripod takes as long as me filming it with you, because there's always someone that you're going to talk to. You always get distracted. You always like to have a whinge. You always like to drag something which could take an hour into 6 hours, because it's just fun having people in the shop.
Fun hanging out with you. So, yeah. I mean, I had to drag it out. Where now it's...
Now at least you can appreciate my pain when I'd be like, look, I just want to get this done in 2 hours so I can go home and edit it and get it done in one day. And you're like, yeah, okay, it doesn't work like that, does it?
That's why it took 6 years.
So when's your next one scheduled for release?
I'm going to try and do one this week, actually.
Okay.
I'm filming something tonight.
Do you not mean 2032?
Well... I need something to, hopefully this week if possible. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I haven't planned anything. I'm just going to figure it out as I go. There's no real pressure. So,
well, the number one rule of YouTube is consistency. So it sounds like you've already messed that up.
Well, no, I've started with one. If I do another
If it is one every 6 years, then that is
my consistency is great.
Should we get into some news then?
Yes, Les. We've got a few weird and wonderful stories this week. None of them particularly, I was going to say interesting. None of them are standouts, but there's a few of them. So I thought we would bunch them all together into a news quiz. They're quite tough questions this week. So I'm thinking I'll let you confer. Nick hasn't done one of these before. We'll not make it a competition this week. You can confer in chat.
I do love a quiz.
You do love a quiz.
Is it us against the audience then, I guess?
Do you know what? It doesn't have to be a competition, Jimmy.
Does it not?
So I'll read the question. We'll leave a couple of seconds for the listeners to guess. And then you two can work together and then give me an answer. Does that work?
Yep.
Sounds good. Okay. Question number 1. Which sporting legend is reportedly set to launch a £10,000 bike next year?
Sporting legend, £10,000 bike. Cav jumps to mind because he's at the process of retiring, transitioning. He's got some status.
I hope it's somebody that's been building bikes for 20 or 30 years, not just bringing out a £10,000 bike because he's raced bikes.
Well, it's a sporting legend, so it's definitely going to be that. Merckx has already got a bike brand.
Cipollini's got one. Contador's got one. Basso's got one.
Wigo, maybe? He's doing lots of things at the minute and riding bikes again. Lance Armstrong, would he bring out his own bike brand?
That would be controversial. I think I'm going to go with Cav.
So, sporting legend. Sporting legend doesn't necessarily mean cycling. One of the Brownlee triathlon boys, Alistair maybe, or is it Alistair or Jonathan? One of them is officially retiring at the end of this season. So perhaps he's thinking different ways of making money. Sporting legend, not cycling, perhaps not a sporting legend, but I'm going to go with Orlando Bloom.
What, the famous sporting legend Orlando Bloom? You have to decide together.
He doesn't do any sport.
He does. He rides bikes. He rides Fescas.
Orlando Bloom.
Yeah. He's mad into riding bikes. Does triathlons.
Yeah, but he's not
and
a
stuff.
sporting legend.
Yeah, okay, he's not a sporting legend.
He's an actor.
I'm trying to think outside of the box.
He's a pirate.
I immediately regret you having to come to one decision between both of you.
We don't have to come to one.
Okay, fine.
I'm going with Orlando Bloom. You're going with Cav.
I'm going to go with Cav.
Okay, both of you are wrong. I'm not keeping score because I didn't plan for this. The answer is Lionel Messi, the GOAT.
Oh my
You're
goodness.
joking.
Yeah.
Footballers and bikes.
Yeah. So according to reports on a Spanish news site, the footballer is about to try his luck in the turbulent cycling industry. Good luck with that. He's launching his own high-end custom race bike in the next few months. Not much is known about it at this point, but it's apparently a collaboration with a top pro cyclist who is yet to be named.
Spanish cyclist, no, he's Argentinian. Is there any Argentinian cyclists?
According to the report, the bike will be on par with the best in the world, apparently, and it's expected to cost between £8,000 and £12,500 or $10,000 to $16,000. Ooh.
This is wild, isn't it?
Who's this for?
It's such a weird space cycling,
Yeah.
isn't it? Because everyone looks in on cycling and just I don't know why, but everyone looks in and goes like, yes, this is where I'm going to retire. I'm gonna make so much money in the cycling industry. I'm going to retire. Whereas the opposite is the truth, that people come into it because they have a passion for it and lose loads of money.
Honestly believe Messi makes more money at the moment than any bike brand in the world will be making.
Yeah, I think it's probably a passion project. Apparently he's a big cycling fan. In 2015, David Brailsford and Pinarello boss Fausto Pinarello hand-delivered him a Team Sky Pinarello Dogma F8. So he's got a taste for fancy bikes.
Oh yeah, I know Pep Guardiola rides a Pinarello as well.
Okay, so this sounds to me, if he's a Pinarello boy, sounds to me like it's going to be Pinarello brokering a deal between him and someone like Geraint Thomas.
Or Wiggins.
Could be Wiggins, yeah, because he was a Pinarello boy,
It has to
wasn't
be
he?
a Pinarello legend, I think, if it's going to be Pinarello.
I don't think it is Pinarello. It just says a custom. It doesn't say that it's...
Yeah, but surely...
I think it's going to be a new
It's not
brand.
like Messi's going to be making the bikes. He needs somebody else to make these bikes for him.
Someone's gone to him and gone, look, we can make a load of money. You just got to put your name to it. It's going to be that kind of gig. This is obviously massive amount of speculation.
Yeah, of course. I just wonder who is the customer base for that.
Rich people. Pinarello's customer base.
Yeah.
Colnago's.
He's going to have to show up to shops and things. We had back in the day when Contador's bike came out and they rang us about selling the bikes and stuff and doing evenings. I was like, yes, but if we're doing an evening, you're going to have to bring Contador with so that he can meet the people because that's going to be the selling point.
Yeah, I'm honestly blown away by who that is. I can't. It just seems wild, that, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, there you go. Question number 2. Track cyclist Matt Richardson has just been banned for life from competing for Australia despite winning 3 medals for the country at this year's Olympics. So why has he been banned?
Safe bet's always doping, but I think you wouldn't have put it in for that. So I'm going to say on the current theme of what's happening in pro cycling, he's started an OnlyFans account or something. Wild like that, and they banned him for that.
I agree. It sounds like it's not drugs for some reason, so I'm going to go with guns.
Guns?
Because if it's not drugs, it's got to be guns.
Okay. You're both wrong on that. He has been banned for life because he swapped nationalities and now competes for Great Britain. So the 25...
Can't swap back.
No, you can't. Basically, yeah, you just can't swap back. So the 25-year-old was born in Maidstone in Kent, but moved to Australia with his family when he was 9 years old, so he has dual citizenship. He apparently began secret talks with GB about switching nationality in February. But his Australian coaches and teammates only found out that he was defecting moments before his official announcement was made in August. Unsurprisingly, the news didn't go down well with Australia's national cycling body. He's since been under investigation by them, and they've just announced that he's banned forever rejoining the squad, saying that he acted in a way which conflicted with the values of Oz Cycling, the Australian national team, and the broader cycling community. Naughty boy.
That's very short-sighted, though. They could have used him as an inside man. You know, GB's got an excellent
A spy.
program. Get him in there for a couple of years, learn what they're doing, come back home and then...
Well, potentially it happened the other way around. Oz Cycling alleges that prior to his announcement, Richardson asked to take his custom race bike, cockpit and Olympic skin suit to Britain. And they say that this presented an unacceptable risk to their intellectual property. So Oz Cycling has now imposed 3 sanctions on Richardson. He's not allowed to rejoin the team at any point in the future. He's prohibited from using any of the team's and its partners' resources, and he's ineligible for any Oz Cycling awards. They also look to impose a 2-year non-competition clause, but they found it to be legally unenforceable. So, I mean, ballsy move.
But it's just really... That's like me saying... I come to this podcast so I can have the inside scoop, so my YouTube channel can be bigger than yours. Like it's not competing in the slightest bit. The GB squad is.
But I mean, by the sounds of it, he did very well for Australia. He got 3 medals. Yeah. I think he got 2 silvers and bronze.
The Aussie track team, I'm assuming it's track, is
yes, it is track.
Like they're
very good as well.
One of the best teams in the world, as good as GB. So I can see how they would be concerned. It does seem a bit weird how people can compete for different nations. I guess you can probably compete for Britain then these days.
I don't have a passport for either. I don't think I can compete for any country at the moment. No, because I don't have citizenship, so technically I'm not British. I'm still South African. I have to put down South African in all my stuff.
But isn't there like a residency rule?
You have to set time, but I think you still have to, as far as I know, at least apply for citizenship, which I've not done.
Right.
Okay, cool. Well, that is that one. Number 3, wearable tech brand Whoop just announced an update that will let you log what controversial piece of data?
Where have you found these questions?
Just on the Facebook news.
This is like the hardest questions I've ever come across. And this is all from this week. This is all new news.
Just this week's news.
This news is wild. This is so hard. Controversial data for a Whoop. Does it let you live track your political ideologies?
What? Because they're that changing?
And controversial.
Okay, got it. Okay. Do you want to add to that, Nick?
That's such a good answer. I think I want to go with that one.
What could possibly be controversial in terms of like
how much you're slacking during your workday?
Ooh.
I'll give you half a point for that in this imaginary thing that I'm not tallying. Work calls is a thing that you can track now, but that wasn't the controversial thing. The controversial thing you can now track is drug use. So you can now track your ketamine, LSD, magic mushroom, and weed use. Other trackables include masturbation, COVID vaccines, cigarettes, work calls, and cold showers. The drug use thing seems like an odd move, and some users have voiced their anger about it, but Whoop says it's looking at it from a health perspective. So the company is currently involved in some ongoing research with a US mental health clinic called the Stellus Center, which offers ketamine infusion therapy as part of treatment for conditions like depression and PTSD. There's also studies that show people who microdose psychedelics report lower levels of anxiety and depression compared to non-microdoses. But what I would say is this is absolutely not an advert for microdosing, by the way. I mean, do what you want with your body, but psychedelics are incredibly powerful, and that can be for the worst as well as the better, I would say.
My mind's blown. See, in ignorance, I've just always thought Whoop tracks your sleep and your steps and exercise, heart rate and things. And I just thought, why would you pay monthly for something like that when any smartwatch, an Apple Watch or Garmin watch, will do the same thing? But no, this is a completely different league of stuff.
I mean, the amount of things that it lets you track is insane. But almost, I mean, I'm not their target market, so I'm speaking from an outsider's perspective, but it feels like tracking for tracking's sake. I don't know what you get out of that, but again, maybe I just...
What I'd like to say is, if anyone from Whoop is listening to this and they need like a deep dive in data in how your health is affected by someone that masturbates a lot, get in touch with Nick. His email address is on his new YouTube channel, and he'll be able to give you all of the statistics you need.
I don't get the data either, because all I do with my data is argue with Jimmy about who slept most the previous night. Like he says me, and then who's got the lowest resting heart rate for the week. And that's all we do with these watches. Like literally just screenshots to each other about who's sleeping more, who's got a lower resting heart rate. I don't even know what that means, but yeah.
My problem is I have an incredibly addictive personality in pretty much anything I start doing. And if I pay too much attention to too much data, it becomes incredibly unhealthy for me. So generally, I try and keep it at like a distance. I kind of keep a loose tabs on my resting heart rate because I find it's a good benchmark for am I really tired or not really tired. But other than that, I do my best just to stay away from too much data because, it's for me personally, it's just not healthy. Whereas Francis, he's just like constantly monitors everything and he has a healthy relationship because it makes him keep doing things. Whereas for me, it makes me do too much things.
He also doesn't eat any food before like lunchtime. He does weird like fasting things. I'm surprised he hasn't got an ice bath yet.
I say that to him all the time.
It's coming. I'm sure it's only a matter of time. The microdosing psychedelics thing, I feel like I see more and more stuff about this. And
sorry, go on.
Go on.
I was just gonna say I think it's very American. It's not really it's not legal over here. I'm sure people are doing it over here, but it's just drugs over here and drugs in America seem to be quite a different thing.
Totally. I listened to recently, it's an old episode of The Diary of a CEO before it was a weird health podcast and when it was actually about CEOs. And there was a very, if you want a cautionary tale about like drug-induced psychosis, there was a very sad but very fascinating episode with a lady called Nicola Kilner, who's one of the founders of a company called The Ordinary. It's like a $2.2 billion beauty company. And I won't spoil it too much in case you want to listen to it because it is a very good episode. But basically her co-founder started messing around with psychedelics and it is a wild story. It just got completely out of control and kind of destroyed their relationship and almost destroyed their company. It's absolutely incredible, the story. But you'll have to listen to it and then we can talk about it next week or something like that. But you should listen. It's good.
Sorry, one last one on
that.
Yeah,
go on.
Just get your kids into cycling. They'll never have enough money for drugs. Simple as that. It's just one of those age-old sayings, and it's true.
True. And also endorphins.
Yeah.
What about dolphins?
Right, number 4. Strava has ruffled some feathers by announcing users can no longer do what?
I know the answer, so I'm out.
Upload rides.
That would ruffle feathers, I think, Jimmy.
What about make routes without spending £600 a year?
That happened years back, mate. Okay. That's already in the future.
What about they have they no longer allow access to their app? You have to do it on a web browser.
It's none of those things. Okay. Do you want to give us the right answer, Nick?
They have blocked their APIs to loads of third party. So you can't share, like coaching data becomes a lot harder. Essentially, Strava's realized that they dominate their space and they've realized everybody else is dependent on them. So loads of other trackers where you could look at maps of where you've ridden. And, at the end of the year, people get there's different, I can't remember the names.
Can I suggest Emily actually gives us the correct answer and then we debate it?
Yeah, you are right. They're not going to share their ride data with third-party apps like VeloViewer, coaching platforms like intervals.icu is one that I saw. What does this mean for customers? Basically, that the data you input to Strava from head units won't be affected, but apps which pull data from Strava will no longer be allowed to process it or share it with other users. So why are they doing it? They say that the changes were made to enhance privacy and prevent third-party platforms from using their users' data to train AI models and potentially misuse it. Interestingly, Strava itself is now playing around with AI. It's launched a beta version of what it calls its athlete intelligence feature last month, which gives subscribers personalized insights and guidance based on their workouts. The news has had a bit of a mixed reception. I did see talk of users cancelling their subscriptions or uploading black photos along with their workouts as a form of protest to the changes. Strava, of course, has a right to protect what it clearly sees as its most valuable asset. It's its data. But integration with other businesses can make your services more valuable to customers as well. I saw DC Rainmaker isn't a fan of it. He was saying Strava seems to be working very hard to kill off the community of tens of thousands of apps that arguably made it so popular. And he said he didn't see how it benefits paying Strava subscribers. Other users pointed out that they should be careful because Garmin and Apple could do the same to them, i.e. they get a lot of their data from an outside source as well. So it's kind of, it's the idea of they're breaking down this ecosystem and that has potentially in the short term a negative impact for consumers. But are they not maybe they're trying to bring that in-house, or I don't know.
I think Strava is building a monopoly, and DC Rainmaker, that's how I know, I watched the video, but he talked a couple of years ago about how he's not subscribing because it's cost us much extra money and everything. But in the video, he just talked again how he has subscribed, meaning, unfortunately, I think it's like a drug. Everybody says they're not going to do it. Other than you three, including Francis, are the only people I've met so far that's actually managed to just ditch Strava completely. Where
we're just incredibly
I've
unsociable.
tried, but it's just so easy to work. It's just such an easy platform to load stuff up to. VeloView has been great because at the end of the year, you can get your little stats for the end of the year, which you can't get with Strava without being premium subscriber. And I've fallen sucker to that. I've actually paid this year as a premium subscriber to use the maps.
Yeah.
And to get my data at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to tell me I didn't ride enough. But yeah, I think they are such a powerhouse now that unfortunately, it's like Apple. If Apple started doing controversial stuff, people are just going to go with it. They say they won't. A few people will protest, but in the end...
Well, it's interesting you say Apple, because they do something similar now. When you download a new app, you get to choose Ask App Not to Track or Ask App to Track. And that's meant to be a privacy enhancement for its users. So, and Strava is kind of putting this like it's doing the same thing. It's protecting users' data.
For the record, I've spoken about this loads of times. I don't actually use Strava. I have many years ago. I don't fully appreciate how this is going to impact Strava users. So to be very clear on this, what I'm taking from it is they're specifically talking about data being sent from Strava to a third-party app, not data being sent to Strava.
Correct, yeah.
So for example, so ultimately, whatever devices and tech that you use to populate your Strava still works and has no issues with. But if you then export your data to something else for it to do something else, that's an issue. I just don't see who that causes an issue for.
It does coaching. A lot of customers that upload their Strava towards a coaching platform.
Yes.
So that they can use that.
Every single one of those people will be able to upload directly from their device to the coaching platform.
I agree with you, but that's cycling orientated on the pretense that you're using a Wahoo or a Garmin or a Hammerhead, where if you're using your phone to record, that data is going nowhere anymore.
How many people that are recording straight to Strava also have a coach? I would say probably not very many.
No, but I do feel that there's other aspects like, so VeloViewer, they say they can't even, if they blanket out all the details about customers' personal details, they still can't use it. So they can't, like VeloViewer's got a map of hotspots of where people are riding and doing activities. That can't happen anymore.
But Strava does that anyway.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is that I think that's what Strava's doing. They're running a monopoly over here.
Yeah.
Because they can start coaching, essentially keep everything in-house. So you don't buy other apps. You don't use Training Peaks. You don't use MyFitnessPal.
But you can still use all those things and have Strava. This is what I don't see it as that big an issue.
No, what I mean is...
And if VeloViewer are saying you can no longer use their heat maps, then that feels like what Strava are saying is, well, we did heat maps first, so stick with ours.
But you have to pay for the Strava one. The other thing as well is, if I take your Garmin's off you, well, then you can't, because you have to then record directly in Strava through your phone. Lauren, when she runs, doesn't record on an Apple Watch. She records on an actual phone straight to Strava. She goes like old school, where you get Strava and you click record activity. That won't go any further anymore. DC Random says something about Wahoo. Wahoo uses a different way that's going to get affected more than Garmin, and Hammerhead uses their own SRAM access app, which I actually prefer to Strava at the moment. So I might ditch my Strava for that, because it gives you like gear ratios and stuff that are geeky things that I'm more interested in. Like what gear I was riding in, was I standing, seated?
It feels you haven't convinced me that this is anything other than a non-event. It doesn't seem like that big a deal to me. It doesn't impact. Granted, I'm not using Strava, so I don't really care about Strava.
Exactly. It doesn't impact us.
But what I'm saying is, though, if I had a coach, if I wanted certain bits of data, I can access all of that data directly from my Garmin or my Garmin Connect. If I want to upload to a coaching platform, I would do it via my Garmin feed rather than my Strava feed.
What I have seen actually is a lot of the apps that are mainly affected have basically said that they are going to be working to make sure that whatever device you are head unit device you are using, you will be able to feed in directly to them. I don't know if that is currently doable. I think maybe Garmin is more ahead than Wahoo, but what they've said is it was in the pipeline for creation anyway, and that project timeline will just move up. So it'll, if they're clever and they want to keep their subscribers, they will just move to cut out the middleman of Strava. It just makes it easy. Strava probably just made it easier for them, but I think that there are workarounds to do it, is what I can tell.
So that's the second part of this whole announcement, is they've given them 30 days notice.
Yes.
And they've given them 30 days notice over Christmas, meaning most of these companies would have had holidays booked in, staff leave. It's a quiet time, meaning for a couple of months, like January, which is a very important month, people training with New Year's resolutions, none of these apps are going to be able to do it. They're going to have to rewrite all their codes, all their APIs.
But what is it? They can't be that significant if they are completely dependent on Strava as a source of data.
It's just an easy API integration. It's just essentially, instead of integrating through 50 different things and everybody's apps, you just use that one, which was a common thing.
It was a risky move from them, isn't it? Because if your whole
it is slightly dubious.
If your whole business is based on a third party app, then
sounds to me like they've been given the kick up the ass they probably need.
Oh well, that is one way to look at it.
Ruthless.
Right, should we move on? Number 5, a big clothing manufacturer that used to make the Tour de France's yellow jersey and made kit for the 2024 Paris Olympics has been placed into receivership after posting a £15.2 million loss. Name that clothing brand.
So Le Coq Sportif used to do the kit for the Tour de France, but I don't think they do anymore. I can't even remember who does currently. Receivership sounds very American, but perhaps it's not.
It's French as well. So I'm going to go with you, Le Coq Sportif, because that's what they called it when Mavic was in trouble.
Oh.
It's protective measures for a company suffering financial difficulties.
I'm going with Le Coq Sportif.
What was the figure?
£15.2 million loss.
It's just a brand that I've not heard of for quite a while.
I think it's going to have to be because I thought it was going to be an American brand. And I was like, well, what could it be? Like, I don't know, Nike, but they're not going to go bust off of a 15 million loss. Le Coq
Sportif.
You are correct. It is Le Coq Sportif. Well done. Yeah, the French company announced it's using the procedure to respond to significant financial pressures while trying to protect 330 staff and hundreds of indirect jobs. Yeah, they're not really a massive cycling brand, are they? It's sports stuff. I feel like if you had told me that they had gone bust in the early 2000s, I would have believed that.
Are you thinking of Kappa, are you?
Jimmy's making fun because I'm wearing Kappa poppers today. and New Balance trainers. It's literally, guys, you laugh, but the 90s is back in.
It's your whole football. You're getting on board with this messy new bike brand.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
That's going to be the cycling kit goes with it.
One of my poppers definitely did come undone as we were having breakfast this morning. I was like, oh, I think I'm flashing someone here. So it's the peril of wearing them, but they're back in. What can I tell you?
It feels like Le Coq Sportif are the kind of brand that you could imagine something like Decathlon just absorbing. Perhaps, Decathlon don't need to absorb something like that, but it just feels like they would.
Is Le Coq Sportif an actual cycling brand? Isn't it just
not really?
I don't
think so. It's general active wear, I think.
Like Kappa.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, last one is Colnago this week released an eye-wateringly expensive steel bike complete with Italian-made components. How much is that bike?
I'm out of the running because we're Colnago dealers, so...
Well, I know you actually sent this to me, so I know the answer to this because of Nick.
Go on then.
So I think it is a steel bike that there's maybe 70 being made, special edition ones. Do they do a special edition bike every single year?
By the sounds of it, this one's more special edition because they've actually made a new bike, not just repainted one of their current models.
It's very regularly though, isn't it?
Yeah, every year. Well, several times a year. Every time there's a Tour de France rider, paint schemes. There's like a Pogacar edition. There's like...
That's pretty common if you have a winner.
Stuff. Yes. They just paint scheme, but this is a new bike, which I don't think they've done for quite a few years.
And it costs...
If I remember rightly, it's maybe 14.5 grand.
15,600 is no.
14.5 is what I have written down. 17,500 euros, 14,500 pounds, $18,300 is what I have. But I will be proved wrong if you want to, Nick.
Retail price £15,499.99.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
There's 70 of them being made globally, but I've got loads of other questions on this bike.
Go on.
So they've made, in collaboration with Campagnolo, they've made a group set and wheel set to go with the bike.
Yeah.
But the bike runs UDH, which is a SRAM standard. You can't buy it with any other group set other than Carmagnolo, so why bother doing that?
Where you can't say that again?
The bike they've used the UDH standard, which I do like a lot, which is a SRAM standard, loads of other manufacturers going over. But the Carmagnolo bike, you can only buy it as a complete bike. It only comes out, it's not a thing of you buy a frame set, pick how you want it built. It comes with Carmagnolo Super Record wireless.
Which you're saying is not UDH.
It's not UDH, it's just normal mech hanger.
So how is it?
Oh, UDH, you can still put a mech hanger on. It's called the name is Universal Derailleur Hanger. But it's just modifying your entire bike to put that in when it comes out with a special edition group set with special edition Colnago X Carmagnolo graphics on. I don't see it ever changing. So I'm wondering, does this mean Carmagnolo is going to switch to UDH eventually or not? A lot of questions that I've got for this. This is what I'm interested in. I know there's rumors that Shimano is going to follow a similar pattern. So a lot of things happening. Second thing that really baffles me about this bike, which I'm slightly annoyed at, is yes, there's only 70 being made. It's really special and all these things. But another YouTube channel has posted a full video following the building of this bike, and not a single part of it's built by Colnago.
What do you mean?
So they show the guy going to Columbus where they make the tubes, picking up the tubes, going to another factory near Modena where they 3D print the lugs and parts needed to make the frame. It then goes to somewhere else in Modena, which is not where Colnago is, where it gets welded together by somebody, to then go to Pisa, which once again is not where Colnago is, to be painted.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
Meaning they've not made this bike at that price point. So
but it's got the sticker on.
Yes, but it's a very expensive. Well, it's painted on.
Yeah. Well, well done. Yes, you were wrong compared to my notes, but I will concede that is the price. It very much fits into the category of window shopping. I think 99.99% of people won't even consider buy it, but it's a nice thing to look at.
So did I win then?
If you want to say that, Jimmy, then
So
you
I
can
won.
say that. Yeah.
I beat Nick.
Well, technically, I got 3 right. You only got 1.
Listen, you were meant to be working together and you didn't listen to the rules, so you're both out.
Now on to this week's big question. It's one for Nick. What are some common mistakes people make when buying a new bike?
Firstly, buying the wrong size. Sizes aren't standardized between different bikes. So, for instance, a 52 centimeter bike from one brand is not going to be the same as a 52 centimeter bike from another brand, essentially. It's going to be based on whether they've measured the top tube or the C tube. Is it sloping? There's a lot of factors. So, big thing I would say is don't just assume that if you're going into a bike shop and you've been riding a 52 centimeter Cervelo and you buy a Colnago, that 52 centimeters is going to be the same size. Check the other measurements.
I feel like bike design has got so complicated now that you can't just look at a size, exactly like you're saying, and it means something. They've all got slightly different seat angles. They've all interpret how they measure things in different ways. And it's just so complicated to work out what bike you need.
It is. And you get loads of bike fitters go out there saying everything works on reach and stack. But I would say, unfortunately, reach and stack only really works if it's the same bike again with the same angles. If the angles are completely different, your reach and stack figures will be affected by how many headset spaces you've got or what your saddle height is.
Or the angle of your seat tube.
Yes. So, well, because of that, yeah. So you need to imagine as a triangle, essentially.
Or a head tube as well, yeah.
It's a lot of things. Secondly, the size you have now doesn't mean your new bike is going to be the same size. You need to start considering if you're on a time trial bike or road bike and you switch into a gravel bike or a different type of discipline, or if it's a more endurance bike versus more of a crit racing bike, angles and things change slightly. Not so much your frame size, but your stem length could be different.
Is there a general rule, like if you were going from road to gravel?
We, as a generalization in our shop, we would say, generally speaking, if you're going from a road bike that you ride regularly to a gravel bike, I would say consider slightly shorter, slightly higher. Mm-hmm. And that's more got to do with not the position you can ride in, but just lifting your bike over things. Bunny hops it's just a bit more of it's a different riding position. You're also riding slightly slower, so you don't need that aggressive position for aerodynamics.
So essentially what you're saying here is based on what you're actually using the bike for may mean that you need a different size bike or componentry, because it isn't just as simple as saying a gravel bike versus a road bike in the same size means that they've done that work for you.
Yeah.
So knowing all of that, as a customer, what are you actually meant to do? You can say, oh, a common mistake is buying the wrong size. Things aren't standardized. You need different stuff. What are you meant? How do you then find what you actually need?
Can I start with this one? First, I would say is, and from my experience, is working with or having a good independent bike shop. The chances are they are going to do more for you than if working with an online retailer. Because I remember buying, you built a bike for me, and we chucked a stem on it. It was a new bike, completely different geometry. It was one of the weird little custom bikes that I did. And I was like, Nick, I think this stem's not quite right. I think I need a different one. You were like, no worries, just bring it in, we'll swap it out. And I was like, granted, we were mates, but even then I was still just kind of like, that's mint. Because I just assumed, all right, I'm going to have to buy another stem. This is rubbish. But the chances are, if you're working with a good bike shop, they're going to be in a position that they can swap it out, assuming you haven't trashed it.
Yeah, well, we do basically saddle height you can change on a bike easily by just an Allen key or quick release lever, depending on your bike. The main things I think that affects things are saddle and stem length. So with both of those, we try and run a thing of where buy a bike with a stem, which we recommend with a bit of consultation, bike fit, and looking at things. If you're not happy with it, we can swap it out to try something else. We always recommend as well, if you're going to buy a sturdy titanium stem, which is a very expensive stem, or something really fancy, always try and buy something cheap first to try.
Just like a really sturdy, strong stem.
It's just it's a lovely titanium brand out there.
Yeah, if you don't know, sturdy is a brand.
Yes. So, yeah, try out different lengths. We're happy to swap it out. I think with your bike, Emily, we did your saddle. You had a saddle that we thought would be great. You didn't like it, and we swapped it for a different one. Mm-hmm. I think Jimmy ended up buying 3 of them afterwards.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's good business for the bike shop. A lot of brands will help you out with that as well.
I guess if you are not in the position where you do have a good bike shop near you, then we've kind of talked about this before, haven't we? Of try to borrow, get stuff secondhand, get cheap stuff from people around you or businesses around you, just to test. The more you can test, the more knowledge you will gain, I guess.
Yeah,
before
totally.
You're making large, expensive purchases.
Yep. I definitely like the idea of if you are in a position that you can afford a really expensive carbon set of bars that cost loads of money and a fancy stem, then, and if it's a new thing to you, you probably are still better off buying the really, really cheap equivalent, especially with stem length, to get an idea of how long it's going to be before then spending the lot of money on the carbon bars. Like I've got the odd set of bars that I foolishly spent stupid money on, like the ones we cut down for my hill climbing bike, that you just end up wasting money on. It's such a shame, such a waste.
Lastly, on that one, I would also say bar width is easily measured and use indication, but you need to also really look into the bar shape. Certain bars, your hoods of the levers are going to sit in weird positions. Some of them are going to be swept forward, which is going to be less comfortable, but more aerodynamic. Some swept back. So just look into shape as well, not just width. That's not the only measurement you need to take into consideration. But yeah, speak to your local bike shop.
Next.
Number 2, getting sucked in by group set choice is a common mistake.
How so?
Take, for instance, you get 2 bike brands and they both have 2 bikes spec'd with, I'm going to use 105 because that's probably the most common group set out there. It doesn't mean the 2 bikes are the same. That's like saying buying a 2-bedroom house in London because it's got 2 bedrooms is the same as buying a 2-bedroom house in Newcastle because it's got 2 bedrooms. Trust me, it's a completely different house and you're going to pay a different amount for it. But it's not the same. You can't just measure. Group set choice essentially gives you very little back. The modern higher end or mid-level group sets all shift the same. They work just as well. The big thing is going to be a weight difference. But that weight difference is going to be so tiny that you could negate that with other things like with mountain bike tire choice, handlebar, stem, seat post. You could claw all the weight back for a lot less money. So don't just compare bikes based on group sets. Look at several factors.
Also, bear in mind that if a good bike, it doesn't matter how much it weighs. I know this will trigger loads of people, but I've ridden a lot of bikes now, and the good ones do not need to be light.
Exactly. And it's not going to make... So in some instances, I would even go as far as to a 2 lighter bike's going to not ride as nice as you want, because to get at that light, there's a negative impact.
And also on the sort of having ridden tons of bikes now, is the difference between group sets. And I think you maybe mentioned it, is it's just so marginal now, isn't it? Like there really is very little difference between any of them, and it just comes down to preference and how you want it to look and how much money you've got to spend.
If you were to flip it over, if you took, arguably, depending on what it is, the best bike in the world, or one of the Tour de France bikes that people are racing on, and I stick a set of Marathon Plus tires on it, it's going to ride like an actual, it's going to feel like you've got wooden wheels.
Yeah.
So
again, from my experience, you 100% do notice the difference between a very entry level set of wheels / tires and super, super high end wheels and tires.
I would just caveat that of saying, before you buy wheels, just because they're very expensive doesn't always mean they're better.
Yeah, totally.
Another common mistake is buying a full new bike every time. Excluding having issues with compatibility or a different discipline, so going from a road bike to a time trial bike or room brake to disc brake, I feel that you always get more value by spending your budget on upgrades for a bike. So, for instance, I split a bike down into 4 categories: frame set, wheel set, finishing kit, group set. Pick 1 or 2 of those categories, or 3, depending on how much your budget allows, and upgrade that. You'll get a lot more value for money rather than buying a bike for, let's say, £1,000 and then next year buying a new bike for £1,200. That extra £200 might not be a better bike. Inflation or COVID might just mean you're buying the same bike again with slightly better, or going from a 105 to an Altegra group set isn't going to give you as much benefit as, let's say, spending your full budget on wheels and finishing kit. And then in a few years down the line, you've got a bit more money, you can upgrade even more. Eventually, you'll end up with a much better bike than just those tiny incremental...
As we mentioned
gains,
last week, it's a good one.
But saying that, if you have to buy a new bike, like you said, discipline changes or it's your first bike or something like that, I would say your initial purchase is by far the most important. So if you need to spend a little bit more to get a much better wheel set or something that you really want, do that, because when you buy a bike, you're buying a complete bike. So spending a bit more on your wheels means you're getting the wheels you actually want, rather than buying a bike for slightly less, but with the wrong wheels, and then later having to buy new wheels. I'm just using wheels as an example over here, because when you buy the new wheels, you're going to have to pay full price for the new wheels and you'll lose all the value you've paid already for the other wheels. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, so I guess what you're saying there is, and I think this probably really applies to custom builds or where you're working with a shop to spec things out. If you at the point of purchase, you can probably get a better set of wheels for maybe 200 quid extra, that if you were to then have to buy them as a whole wheel set, having already bought a lower quality one, you probably have to spend £800, for example.
Yes, exactly. The next one is falling for the marketing out there. Simple one was back in the day, I'm going to use Victoria as an example. They released a set of tires and the marketing slogan said it's 40% faster.
Compared to what?
Exactly. That's exactly my thing. I had a lad working in the shop for me at the time, and he said to a customer this exact thing: this will make you 40% faster. And I had to interject straight away. I'm like, whoa, you can't say that to people. Because if I'm riding at 30 kilometers / 18 miles an hour at the moment, average speed, comfortably, by being 40% faster means I'm winning the Tour de France next year. So all I have to do is buy those tires.
And the man in the shop, Tadej Pogacar.
He was right. The same thing goes with aero gains, wattage gains. Just test things. If they're saying it's going to give you 10 extra watts, yes, they might have gotten 10 extra watts in their testing at 500 watts. But that means you have to ride 500 watts before you get your 10 extra watts, which most of us, normal mere mortals, are not going to do on an everyday basis. So just essentially, I'm not saying marketing is bad, but just take it with a pinch of salt and think about it logically.
Ultimately, the more you can try, the better you're going to be off. The more informed you're going to be. Something which we think is a really good source, or something I think is a really good source of trying stuff, is ask your mates. Everyone's got bits and pieces laying around. If you're thinking maybe I'd be better off with a 80mm stem instead of a 100mm one, just drop your mates a message and just be like, does anyone have a stem I can borrow? So you can give it a try rather than having to buy it. Similarly, you can ask shops and get some. There's usually going to be parts bins and things that you can try stuff from.
We've got demo saddles and things like that. I've lent people pedals before. There's a lot of things. Other stuff's much easier. Handlebar tape tires, they're perishable, so they will wear out eventually. So when you try a new one, try. But just don't fall for the marketing. The only caveat to that I would say is if you're buying a bike because the marketing tells you an aero bike looks better and you're happy to buy it because you want a bike that you like the look of, by all means, go for it. But don't fool yourself into thinking that you need it.
Yeah, definitely don't stretch yourself financially for something that because it's going to get you a couple of watts, because it's not worth it.
The next common mistake is not challenging your sources. So when you speak to somebody, make sure that whoever is telling you something is good or is better than something else, that they've actually tried the something else or other things. We've seen it loads where we've got people in that have only ridden one brand of pedals, then going on telling everybody on their Facebook club groups that these are the best pedals. Unfortunately, they might be wrong, but essentially, if you've not ridden anything else, you don't know better. Same goes for tires, bike brands, different things. Just make sure whoever you're taking advice from is try different things. In the shop, I put James on a new set of tires almost every single month, just so that we've got a bit of, he rides a lot. The kid's done close to 30,000 kilometers this year. So it's just a good test bench to kind of see, so that we're not just making up stuff based on bias. You need to try different things. Also make sure your info is up to date, because something might have been good 20 years ago, but technology might have moved on a lot.
Or vice versa. It might have been crap and now it's quite good.
Yeah.
I think as well, something that people have an issue with and you should definitely consider is certain people or certain shops have sponsorship and or product limitations. It's actually something that used to be considered back in my finance days. Is there used to be a thing called a tied agent, and it essentially would mean that they could only sell certain financial products from certain sources rather than the whole of the market, which ultimately means that their opinion is biased. So it's ultimately the idea of if the shop if someone in a shop is telling you this is the best product ever and they only sell 2 brands of that, then it's kind of limiting. Whereas if you can have a conversation where they are not limited by what they can access, then you're going to have a whole of market representation.
Yeah, I agree with you. So we in our shop, we don't stock bikes. Everything we order for customers just stops us from falling into the trap, which is a difficult one, where if a bike shop's got 500 bikes in stock and you want to buy something, they are more likely, if they're stuck with those bikes, to try and put you onto one of them purely because they need to get rid of the bikes.
That was a classic tale of Evan Cycles in this country, wasn't it? Mis-selling people the size bikes because they'd go, we've got this one we need to get rid of. Yeah, that one fits.
It's much easier, yeah. And it's wrong, but unfortunately is one of those things that is a problem. Where I would say there is a difference is some shops would be picking brands not based on bias, but just they looked into the products. That's what they like. That's what they believe in, and that's fine. A good example for us is where people can give us the same criticism as SRAM Enduro bearings. But I believe in the product. And that's why I sell it. I still have the other options. If somebody comes in and says, I want Campag or I want Shimano, by all means, we'll get it for you. We will argue our case why we think what we like is better. But if that's what you want, then go for it. We're a Ceramic Speed service center, but I still prefer Enduro bearings, and that's just from my own testing and riding. So yeah. Next common mistake is letting wants outweigh needs. Yes, you might want something, but make sure before you buy a bike that you know what you want to do with the bike. Because buying a full aero racing road bike and using it in the winter as a commuter might not be the best choice. So just really consider what you want to use the bike for before you even go into the bike shop, and then have a conversation with them so they can steer you into the essentially it'll bring down your choices a lot more, which is better. So it can narrow down what's going to be best for what you want to do. And that's based on everything. It's frame size, frame shape, discipline, tire size, tire
clearance.
Consistency. I mean, a racing tire in winter over here is not a good idea. Buy something with more puncture resistance or more grip. Definitely go for grip, but yeah.
You're definitely going to be quicker on your winter ride if you're not puncturing 5 times and slipping out on all of the corners.
Exactly, dying. And the last mistake, which is very specific, but I've noticed a lot lately, is bed your brakes in properly if you've got disc brakes when you're buying a new bike.
How do you do that, though?
How do you do that? There's loads of different brands and different manufacturers come up with different specs, but the overreaching argument is don't come to an abrupt stop too quickly on new brake pads. And when I say too quickly, I mean on the first ride. In an ideal world, you're going to speed up to about 20, 25 kilometers an hour. and then pull your brakes. You can pull them fairly hard, but just before, when you get to a walking pace, let go of them again. So all you want is to heat up the pads, heat up the rotors, and that'll transfer pad resin onto your rotors. It'll work much better. SRAM, for example, if you don't do this properly, your bike's going to make like a gurgling noise. Like that.
It's the worst.
And people blame the brakes, but it's just because they've gone straight out, started pulling skids all over the parking lot with a new bike.
But that's what you're supposed to do with a new bike.
Just wait until you've done your first ride, bed it in properly, and your brakes are going to work better, last longer, and you're going to be a happy person. And when you want to stop, they're going to stop.
Thank you for that, Nick. If you have any things that you would like to add, sling them in the comments down below and help out your fellow audience member. Time for another round of unpopular opinions. We're going to read out some cycling hot takes, debate them, and decide if we agree or disagree.
Okay, first one is from Charlie, who says, as we get into the winter months and indoor training becomes more frequent, I've noticed an uptake in the amount of FTP-related social media posts, likely due to more rides on Zwift, etc., where it's more accessible. My unpopular opinion is that FTP is actually a negative statistic and should be ignored by most, as it just creates a ranking for people to bully/undermine those lower down the ranks. I've been seeing this more frequently on social recently, and it really frustrates me. If you're training for a major event, it's useful. However, I don't think 90% of cyclists should care about it.
Yes, 100%. He's right. Skills beat fitness every day of the week. Just because you've got a high FTP doesn't mean you're going to beat somebody else with a lower FTP. Loads of factors come into play. How good are you at drafting? Because you sit behind that person or well in a bunch while he's sitting in the window on a gutter, you're going to be a lot fresher. Do you have a higher max output? So can you outsprint the guy? How well do you recover?
Girl.
Sorry?
Or girl.
Or girl, yes.
I actually think Pete Hawkins, who we've had on this podcast before, is a really good example of this. You are as well, annoyingly, really annoyingly. And I talked to Francis quite a bit about this. It's ultimately racecraft, and it applies to, chopping around with your mates as well. You don't have to be the fittest person in the world to be a better cyclist than someone. Fitness is just a very black and white, time trialing almost method of measuring stuff. The positive for an FTP test is if you are using it for yourself, it's a really good benchmark for where you are now and where you are in the future. But it shouldn't. Knowing someone else's FTP doesn't really, it's irrelevant.
It means nothing because weight comes into factor if you're a bigger rider, more muscular, if you're a skinnier rider. If two riders are going up a hill and one is 50 kilos and one's 100 kilos and they're going up that hill, the 50 kilo rider, don't quote me on these numbers, but could ride up there for 200 watts. And so that might be his FTP. And the 100 kilo rider would need, let's say, 400 watts, double the watts to ride to the top of the hill. At the same time. But if they get to the top of the hill and decide, let's press on the flat bit or the downhill at the same watts, and the 50 kilo rider keeps going at 200 watts, but it's flat now. So gravity doesn't play against you. And the 100 kilo rider holds his 400 watts. He's going to absolutely dust him.
You've basically described me and you riding. The elevation goes up and I'm like, aha, I can hurt Nick. And then it is anything other than, or if it's under 4%, then you just kind of like, you're so comfortable riding away from me. I'm like, oh God.
So you're perfectly right saying, yes, by all means, use it for your own benchmark. Also know that FTP tests aren't accurate. Unless you're in a lab getting lactate tested, your protocol could be different to the other guys. You could have not pushed as hard. Most people do like 2 8-minute tests or 20-minute tests. I'm not really up to date with these things, but it's just not accurate.
So it's almost like me weighing on a set of scales here and then doing it at my house, and they're calibrated differently. And
different days of the week, different times of the day.
Whether you've had a poop or not.
Yes, loads of factors. It's just not. Don't live off of that. Or do it, but don't be comparing to your mates because it means nothing.
Yeah, I feel like if your mates are doing that, just get better mates.
Jimmy sends me his FTP every week.
And it hasn't changed. Well, it has. It's continuously gone down. But I have no method to know whether it's gone down.
I'm in double figures now. I'm soon going to be like over the 100.
Right, next one is from Adam. Unpopular opinion. Gains from clipless pedals are far outbalanced by the faff of riding them for all but the elite. I spent 8 years riding clipless. Then 2 years ago, I took up mountain biking and started riding with flats. I soon realised that there was no difference in performance, and stepping off the bike without clip-clopping around was so much better. All 3 of my bikes, road gravel and EMTB, are now flat flats, and I have never looked back. Love the podcast. I feel like that's a very unpopular opinion.
That is definitely an unpopular opinion. Personally, I think SPDs, mountain bike shoes, whatever you want to call them, / pedals are, for me, they're where I like to be. You can walk around in them quite fine, although they are a little bit stiff, but you still get a good cycling connected experience.
You can't have proper pedal stroke without being clipped in. That's a very unpopular opinion, but that's just the way it is. You can't scrape at the bottom of your pedal stroke. You can't pull up at the back. Now, if the industry figures out a way to monetize pedal stroke, which I haven't been able to do, like aero and weight and all these things, trust me, that'll be the biggest thing they talk about.
They have.
Because that'll give you the most gains.
They have monetized it. It's clipless pedals.
Yes, but in terms of trying to sell people the gains, Garmin is quite good because if you buy the power pedals, it shows you your peak power phase and all these things. But by improvising, same as running. If you can run well with, if you've got a better cadence and better running technique,
Gait.
you are going to be more efficient. Gait, I don't know anything about running.
I guess what this guy is saying is, does that matter for anyone but the elite?
It just makes things easier. So I rode a bike the other day, my wife's bike, up to Skoda garage I said the other day, probably a year ago now, and I almost died going up that hill in my trainers, where usually, and also riding up to the studio on Francis Little Brompton absolutely kills me. I know the Brompton's harder, but I've done it on normal bikes as well. You get more efficiency. It's like saying you can run in flip-flops. Yes, you can. I mean, I've done an Ironman in flip-flops, but it wasn't a good idea. I mean, I've been much better off in proper actual running shoes.
So I disagree with you to an extent. I don't think you need clipless pedals, and flat pedals are absolutely perfectly fine. However, if you have ridden competitively or want to ride hard and want to ride fast, you are probably going to be better off with clipped in shoes. And part of the reason for that is the connection to the bike. You're definitely not going to slip out of them. You're definitely going to stay on the pedal rather than slide off it. And you are going to benefit from increased efficiency. However, I think in the grand scheme of things, it probably doesn't actually represent a huge amount of performance unless you are elite. So although this is a very unpopular opinion, I do in some respects agree with it. And I am a big believer of ride whatever the hell you want to ride. So if you are enjoying riding flats, ride flats. And if you are listening to this and you ride in clipless and you always go, it's a bit annoying, try flats. You might like it.
I tried it. I didn't. But yeah.
Next one is from Luke from Tampa, Florida, who says, my unpopular opinion as a bike racer is that cyclocross does not deserve the death it's currently receiving in the bike industry. Don't get me wrong, gravel is awesome, but I don't think it's fair that companies are replacing their cyclocross bikes with gravel bikes. They are not the same discipline.
Yes, I agree with what he's saying, but unfortunately, the most fundamental and basic economic concept in the world is supply and demand. And unfortunately, I think the bike manufacturers are realizing the demand for cyclocross bikes just aren't there compared to gravel. Big brands, like arguably one of the most well-known cyclocross brands in the world, which is Ridley, told me last year that gravel has outsold their road division, not just cyclocross. So unfortunately, they're going to focus. They still make a cyclocross bike, but they do it because of legacy, not because of any smart financial decisions. Unless you are Svennis, who's a cyclocross god, you could get around on a gravel bike still.
So here's a potentially unpopular opinion. I think cyclocross and gravel bikes are actually the same thing. There will be hardcore cyclocross people which will argue different geometry and different BB heights, but they're bikes with big tire clearance. They do the same stuff. You can do any cyclocross event on any gravel bike. You can do most gravel stuff on any cyclocross bike, sort of.
I'm going to say you're wrong.
I'm not wrong.
No,
the only thing it applies to is those super marginal people like our pal Tony Fawcett, who races to win. He wants a cyclocross bike because the agility, and they're going to get covered in mud.
Have you ever seen Tony ride a cyclocross bike? It's wonderful to watch. The kid's technical skills is unreal. And he does really well in the corners and around things like that, where some of the bigger cyclists can, if it's a long straights in the course, they do better than Tony by sharp corners, which is true. A cyclocross bike is designed with higher bottom bracket. It's got tighter angles. It's got made to be shouldered easier. But generally speaking, cyclocross is limited to 33 mil tires. So the clearance only goes up to about 35 mil. Where gravel now, they've proven for racing, you need up to closer to 50 mil tire clearance. You also, cyclocross, even at Matthew Van Der Poel's level, they'll never go over 40 kilometers an hour. So the bike stability is designed for that speed, which is more than enough for most people. But I do some gravel rides with Josh where we're hitting 80k an hour. I want the stability of a slightly slacker head angle and things like that. So they're two different bikes.
They're not.
But saying one is like, I will struggle with the cyclocross bike and what I'm doing. And I've had quite a few cyclocross bikes where I wouldn't struggle for my ability, which is really low, to do a cyclocross race on my gravel bike. I'd arguably be better off because I put my big tires on.
Well, I think on that one, we're going to have to agree to disagree.
Fair enough.
Do you have an unpopular cycle opinion? Well, we want to hear it. Send yours to wildonespodcast@cademedia.co.uk and we might feature it on a future episode. Next up is Fluff Up of the Week.
The fluff up of this week is that we have unknowingly been terrifying our dog, haven't we, week after week? Because we introduced a clap at the beginning of the episode just to sync all of the audio. And what I hadn't appreciated is that every time Jimmy clapped, Bella was getting scared. And it got to the point where she's been hiding in the corner. Why is she hiding in the corner as soon as we sit in our seats? It's because she's terrified of the clap. We worked this out a couple of weeks ago. And then she started going to my mum and dad's instead of coming in here. Now she's back coming in here and we've stopped doing the clap. This is why she was sitting on my knee as well, because she was sitting on my knee shaking, waiting for it to happen. So we've cut out the clap. We're not doing the clap anymore. I have bought us a clicker board like they do in the movies. But I'm also too scared to use that. What I need to do is click it, give her a sweet. Click it, give her a sweet. Teach her that it's okay, and then we'll start using that. So, yeah, it's a bit of a behind-the-scenes fluff up.
I'm going to miss Jimmy's funny voicing that he does, which I think you should do.
Yeah, this is your temporary one, isn't it?
Yeah, instead of a clap, I'm just making a noise so that there's a spike on the audio tracks.
I guess we're going for the podcast.
She looked at me then, but she just went, what an idiot.
Yeah. Also, I was looking through emails yesterday for the show, and I got a feeling from emails that maybe I'd made a couple of errors in the edit last week. I already explained that was on a tight turnaround. So if you noticed, if you heard or you saw anything, then no, you didn't. Okay, well, I'm not.
Do you know what this was?
No, I don't even know. I'm not looking back over it. It's gone now. It's into the ether. I don't know what happened, but listen, you got it out on the right day. So
yeah, so
stop
you
complaining.
can't have everything. Yeah, exactly.
Can't have everything. Geesh.
Greedy bastards.
Okay, should we do listeners takeover?
Let's do it.
Okay, we have one from Chris who says, how do you dry a bike? He says, I'm 46 and I still have no idea how to finish off cleaning my bike properly. My son is riding cyclocross and see, someone's holding up the candle for cyclocross still.
On a gravel bike though.
And the mud has now hit in earnest, so I'm again wondering about this. He says he leaves his bike in the garage or shed, and if left to drip dry overnight, he notices rust spots will start to appear on the chain by morning, which is very common. He says, obviously I can dry it a bit with a cloth, but is that enough to then add chain oil? There's still a fair amount of wet on the drivetrain if I do this. I've been wondering about using a hairdryer, but then realised that this is almost certainly bonkers. So what is going wrong here?
I think there's probably loads of people which use hairdryers. I don't know if it is bonkers or not. We have a solution to this.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add on this, Nick?
I find this, I should have an answer for this, but I don't. The shop's got a massive heater and it just dries naturally in the shop because we don't leave things overnight wet.
Well, you're Mr. £15,000 bike, so you've probably got like a vault in your
my
house.
bike lives in the kitchen.
Well, we actually went through this. There was a point where we were living at my parents' house and we were keeping our bikes in the garage, and we found the same thing, didn't we?
Yes, so what you need to do is get a water displacer. In the UK, I don't know where else it's available. WD-40 is an example of it. I'm sure there's loads of other brands. And technically, it can be a lubricant, but don't use it as a lubricant. But what WD-40 actually does is it pushes water out of stuff. So make sure you don't get it anywhere near your rotors because it'll ruin them, or your brake pads or anything like that. Spray WD-40 on the chain, pushes all the water out, dry it with a rag, lube your chain up, obviously dry everything else with just a different cloth as well, and then hopefully you'll be all right. Simple as that. Bosh, done.
Not on the we did it on the cassette, didn't we?
Yeah, you catch a bit of the cassette.
But try and do not get your rotors.
Yeah, cover your rotors if you can, or just make sure it doesn't go anywhere near them. You can get disc brake cleaners. I always recommend getting ones for cars rather than bikes, because the ones for bicycles are unbelievably overpriced, and it's the exact same product as the one that they use for cars, which are always cheaper.
Or even cheaper, buy yourself clear alcohol, put it in a spray bottle, spray it on. Yes, I agree with everything you've said there. Dry your or not your rotors, leave your rotors alone, they won't rust. Dry your disc brake calipers with a rag, possibly covered all in rag, spray the rest in WD-40, especially if you're in the shed. One thing I would say, do not miss out your spoke nipples. That's arguably the most important one you're going to drive because people forget about that.
Or dry them.
Well, dry them or no, WD-40 or use
I would never recommend that because it's going to be so hard to spray your nipples without hitting your rotors.
Got all the hose thing. You just want to take some time, but trust me, in the long run, especially if you've got Mavic wheels, this will pay off because they won't seize up.
Was that a dig at Mavic wheels?
No, it's just I think there's more of them on people's bikes than that as an issue back in the day.
Right.
It probably still is. And I would lube your chain before you go to bed.
Classic before bed activity for Nick Vieri.
Lubing his chin. Wink, wink.
And then logging it on his Whoop. Thank you to everyone who wrote in. Keep sending your emails. We want your questions, your cycling stories, and other fun stuff. So send it to wildonespodcast@cademedia.co.uk. That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. Thank you to Nick for joining us. Make sure you follow and or subscribe so you don't miss out on the next episode. And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Thanks, Nick. See ya.